Good afternoon and welcome to the CDFA Hotline. My name is Kristen Sharon, and today we are talking about a topic that can create a lot of fear, suspicion, and uncertainty during divorce, and that is hidden assets and financial investigations. One of the most common concerns that I hear from people going through a divorce is, how do I know if my spouse is telling the truth about our finances? Sometimes that concern turns out to be unfounded. Other times there are legitimate questions about missing accounts, undisclosed income, business interests, cryptocurrency holdings, or assets that just don't seem to hold up. When large sums of money, retirement accounts, businesses, real estate, and financial support are on the line, having accurate information is critical. That's why today we're taking a closer look at the role investigators can play in helping attorneys, CDFAs, financial professionals, and individuals better understand the financial picture during divorce. Joining me today is Philip Segal. He is the founder of Charles Griffin Intelligence. Philip is an attorney, an investigator, an author, a nationally recognized expert in financial investigations, asset searches, due diligence, and litigation support. He spent years helping uncover financial information in complex matters, including divorce cases involving closely held businesses, hidden assets, and undisclosed sources of income. So today we are going to discuss some of the biggest misconceptions about hidden assets, some common red flags that may warrant further investigation, and what people should know before assuming that their spouse has fully disclosed everything. For those of you who are new to the show, the CDFA Hotline provides the public with an opportunity to hear from professionals in the divorce and financial industry to learn more about the divorce process. Before we begin, I just want to remind everyone that while we will be discussing divorce, financial, and investigative topics today, we cannot provide personalized legal, financial, or tax advice. Every divorce situation is different and unique, and laws vary by state. So nothing you hear during this episode should be considered legal advice, financial advice, tax advice, or a recommendation to take any specific action in your own case. Please do not rely on anything you hear today as a substitute for advice about your specific situation. We hope to provide you with information that helps you ask better questions and identify resources that may be helpful to you as you navigate the divorce process. So, Philip, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Glad to be here.
Okay, so when most people hear the word private investigator, they think cheating spouses. In reality, how much of your work involves following people around versus following money?
Zero following people around. I just don't do that. If you need someone followed, I'll find you someone who can do that. A lot of times people think from the movies that you have to prove infidelity in order to have a cause of action in divorce. But certainly here in New York, all you have to do is live apart for a year. You don't have to have any proof of infidelity. I have had clients who want to know anyway, even though it doesn't help their case. And I say, I can find you somebody, but I'm a public records and database person, and interviews if possible or warranted. And I don't do any of that following around stuff.
So tell us a little bit more about following the money.
I think that what's important is when you are getting divorced, that trust is broken down or at least is in doubt. It's helpful if you know that you don't know everything. And for purposes of this podcast, let's just say we're working for a wife who is investigating a husband. I've done it the other way. I've done wife and wife, husband and husband, but most of the work I do is a woman who says, I don't think he's telling me all of the truth. And that happens because either there's no trust, or sometimes there was trust all the way until the divorce, and the woman realizes she knows nothing about the husband's businesses. She knows that he has a plumbing and heating business with 12 trucks and 40 employees and some buildings, but other than that, she has no idea how it's constituted, what the business owns, how it does. And so she needs to know more. And that happens especially when things are going along seemingly fine, and the husband tells her we're worth $12 million or $8 million. And then all of a sudden, as the divorce is coming up, he says, I've had a couple of bad years. We're actually worth $2 million. And how did that happen? And how did you had such a bad year? I didn't know about that. How did you not tell me? And is it true? So at that point, I think it's a good idea to take a fresh look at everything that is associated with this person, with this husband. And what I like to do is give clients a questionnaire and I say, you tell me everything you know or think you know about your husband. Every phone number, every address, every person he works with, people he might be hiding money through, what he might name a company, what he might name a company based on maybe a summer camp he went to or a dog he liked, or sometimes people have naming conventions for companies that are identifiable. So I think sometimes it seems to me in divorce a woman will know more than she thinks she knows, but at the same time, she may think she knows more than she does. So she'll know more about the husband's habits and how he would name things and who his friends are and where he likes to go on vacation and what banks he's used in the past. She may know all that, but on the other hand, she may think she knows how the business is constituted, or she may think she knows that he'll have no assets outside of North Carolina because he's just a North Carolina guy and you won't find anything anywhere else. And I then say, let's just check, because a lot of times it's very easy to start up a company in Nevada or in Delaware or in Texas remotely. The world is flat. You can do that from or Wyoming, sitting in your chair in North Carolina, and you have a Wyoming company and money is going there. And if you hadn't looked, you wouldn't have found it. So that's the main thing. And what I like to do is give the client a roadmap of everything they need to find out about. One of the main misconceptions about what I do, probably the biggest one, is that people think there's this magic box that investigators have and they can put in someone's social security number and, like in NCIS or NYPD procedurals, find out all the guy's bank accounts. Oh, look what he did on his credit card last month. And I can't see any of that. I'm not allowed to see that. That's something that a judge has to give you permission to go see. So what I do is I look at the public record and I say, here are all the indicators of things you may not have known about. You said he had 4 buildings. Well, we found 6 buildings. You say you have he has a fishing cabin with his cousin in northern Montana, and it's not worth very much. I found out that it's actually worth $1 million and it's owned through a company. It's not his, it's through a company. And maybe that won't even appear on the net worth statement. So I find things that they can then say through their lawyer, we want to know about this. We want to know about that. You didn't put this on your net worth statement. We dispute that this fishing cabin is worth $80,000. Here's a deed. It's worth $1 million. Here's the tax bill. And that is very powerful in divorce because you're really only looking to get the number you want. You're aiming to settle this if you possibly can, because going to court and having a trial is a terrible burden, an emotional burden on kids, on litigants. That's very expensive. So if you can say, hey, we found an extra $1.5 million just looking without any kind of judicial discovery, that's pretty powerful. And that's what I like to provide. And it's not that expensive to do that.
So, one of the biggest fears people have during divorce is that their spouse is hiding money. And how common is hidden asset activity versus people simply not understanding the family's finances? You touched on that a little bit, but how often do you actually find something?
I find things most of the time because it's a self-selected group. If there is not much money to be found, then I don't get hired because it's not worth it. If there's a bit of trust, or they think that what's being hidden can't be that much, even if they think they're worth 3 million and the husband says I'm worth 2.5 million, maybe then they're not going to hire me. When they hire me, it's because there's a rather large gap, usually. And so in those cases, I usually find something that they didn't know. And in some cases, once or twice, I've been hired and I just say, do you have any reason to believe he's hiding anything? And they say, no, I just want to make sure so I can sleep at night. Fine. So then in those cases, sometimes I don't find anything, but they have the satisfaction and I'll say to them, what does he do? He drives a vehicle for the town. He's a town maintenance vehicle driver. And do you think he owns anything else? I don't know. I don't think so. So I take a look and you're right. He's just drives a town vehicle and there's nothing. But most of the time, by the time I get in there and there's enough money at stake, I'll find something. And what I tell them is, if you have something like equitable distribution or community property in your state, one of the two, if I find and say I'm going to charge you $4,000, if I find an $8,000 asset you didn't know about, you broke even, because You're going to get half of that. And so one time I had a very well-informed woman, because a lot of times these women are sophisticated financially. They have their own businesses, their own practice, they're lawyers, they're doctors, and they have a husband who has a business, and they just don't understand what it is because they're busy with their own lives and also probably doing more than half the work with the children is mostly the case. So sometimes they just say, this one woman said to me, this guy has all these different businesses, and she was right about most things. And what I found that she didn't know about was a $45,000 boat slip at an expensive marina. Half of 45,000 is 22.5, and my fee was 4. So that was a great return on her investment. And really, financial advisors will tell you that kind of a return with not very much risk is hard to find
Yeah.
on Wall Street. Remember, so that's how I put it. I put it as a risk and reward proposition, and that makes sense to a lot of people. And then, of course, most of the time, you find more than that. Oh, here's an extra building, or he's a State Farm agent, and that seems. What could you find that he works for State Farm? He's a State Farm agent, and he's licensed to sell all kinds of different insurance through different companies. And you have to get the information from several State Farm subsidiaries when you're doing your discovery, not just one. He doesn't just work for the big parent State Farm company, wherever that is. They have lots and lots of little subsidiaries in the different states. And this one State Farm guy, I remember 2 years ago, he had just formed a brand new LLC with his female business partner and possible mistress 2 months before filing for divorce. And I said, he probably doesn't know that you know about that. And he wasn't very sophisticated. It was formed care of the same office as the companies we knew about. But there we go. So maybe he's diverting money through that company, because how does he get paid? When you get your car fixed and you want to write a check, people don't write a lot of checks anymore. But if you're getting your car fixed at Toyota, you don't just write a check to Toyota. It's to the something dealership, LLC, or whatever. And you'll write it to whatever they tell you to write it, but you don't know how your Toyota dealership is sequestering the money you give them for a repair. Could go into one of 20 different companies, and you don't care. But if you're doing an asset search, that's very important. So that's the kind of thing it's important to pay attention to. And I similarly, you want to look at maybe other people's companies, not just his companies, because I did another case and there was a man, and I didn't find much. However, his wife said he's living with this woman. He's moved down to Texas. So they were living in Texas. And I looked at the woman, and up came on the databases an LLC that she had formed in Wyoming. And and it was easy to get that paperwork for free. And guess whose cell phone number was on the formation document of the Wyoming company? The husband's. So that gave you some leverage to say to the court, we'd like to see the bank account of this company because he's associated with it, because there's his phone number.
And like you said, there's a difference between identifying assets and identifying diverted income, which you can potentially utilize for alimony or child support, which could have long-term financial benefits.
And an asset is maybe a company. I'm not going to be able to see the bank accounts. I'm not going to see the balance sheet of that company myself. But you can go in divorce court and say to the judge, we need to see this. This is part of the marital estate. And so I don't come up with a quick answer. Here is your real marital estate balance sheet. I'm not going to really be able to do that. But I am going to say, here's a lot of stuff you didn't know about. Take this to your lawyer and your financial advisor, and you'll see that once it all comes in, you may even need a forensic accountant if they won't cooperate. And if the forensic accountant says, looking at how much money is in this company, I can't believe that all the income from that company really came back to the husband. It's over here, or it's over there, or it got transferred to some place we don't even understand what that is. They might then call me back and say, what's this thing that got an $8,000 transfer? What is that? And sometimes that's an overseas trust in a tax haven.
What are some of the biggest red flags that suggest a spouse might be hiding income, assets, or a business interest during divorce? Are there common red flags that you see?
I think the commonest one is a sudden decrease in net worth. unexplained decrease that. Just sometimes people do have a bad year, but if it comes as a great surprise, oh, things are tight now. They weren't tight before I filed for divorce. Now they're tight. Or obviously infidelity is going to be a red flag, especially if it's secret. Some guys are brazen and they don't care, but a lot of guys are sneaking around. And so anytime the trust breaks down, I think that's enough of a red flag, because you have to trust the other person that you're getting all the information. If you don't trust them, then it's time to make sure. And so some of these people, even who don't think there's anything, still want to make sure. But that's what I see is formation of new companies, reconstituting the business, or reorganizing the business. Any new company is going to be problematic for me to say, yeah, seems like you're getting all the information. If it's a brand new structure, there's also unexplained travel. Why did you need to go to Reno? What's in Reno? Could be as a gambling problem, but these days you don't have to go to Nevada to gamble. So what are you doing over there? Anytime there's just not, you don't understand. And so sometimes couples have an arrangement that he'll do the finances and she does the house and the car and the vet and the schools and all that. But then if it's an open, trusting relationship, he can say, anything you want to see, it's right here. It's all here. And all of a sudden, if that now you can't see, oh, I asked him for this and he won't show it to me, or he won't produce. I just signed the tax return, but I don't have a copy of it, and our accountant won't produce it for me. I can't look at the tax returns. Sometimes recent tax returns are missing. Bad.
Yeah. And like you said, there's a value in the peace of mind in knowing that I checked. I think that there's a lot of people that have ongoing doubt and regret about their divorce settlement. And to have someone just come behind and double check to make sure, I would think that there's a great deal of satisfaction in that.
Yeah. And for me, mostly it relates to the part of divorce that I don't really see. I hear about it, and that's the kids. Sometimes a better settlement can mean the kids don't have to change schools, can mean you don't have to move. Those are big things. And I don't see it. I just say, okay, give me what you know and I'll go find it. But what's riding on that? And they don't always tell me, because I often deal with a CDFA who is listening to the client. I don't even meet the client. I just get a written questionnaire. That keeps my costs down as well. But the CDFA knows the story better and will give me all kinds of good information. But I do know that what's riding on it is more than just, I had to quit this country club, but I'm basically okay. It's much more than that sometimes. I have to move. The kids have to change. The kids can't go to this university because they have to go to a state school because we can't afford that university anymore, even though their father promised them they could go there if they got in. They got in, and now we don't know. And I had one guy here in New York last year wouldn't pay for the kids' private school unless the wife decided to settle right away. There's all kinds of awful leverage going on. Would show up and pay cash for the kids' braces at the orthodontist. So had money. There was lots of money, but was holding it over, and it was dreadful. And that kind of stress, whether or not he has more money than you. In that case, I found lots of stuff, and it was very helpful. But had I not found anything, at least she would have known, okay. And sometimes these guys have it, and the wife will run out of money trying to find it. If he's been properly briefed and he's paid enough, it can all have been disappeared into overseas trusts, and it's going to be much, much harder to find.
Yeah.
And sometimes they have to decide, is it worth spending an extra $80,000 to try and find $400,000? And sometimes it isn't.
Yeah. A lot of people hear stories about hidden cryptocurrency accounts. Is crypto becoming a bigger issue in divorce investigations, or is it just receiving more attention than it deserves?
I think you always have to pay attention to it. The thing about crypto is if you are ready to spend the money to do discovery, you can find a crypto account. If you know that he's got crypto, and if you get access to his bank account, say his bank account at Bank of America, you can often find the platform that he used to buy the crypto with, because with crypto you have to bring money out of the conventional money system and give it to the crypto platform in order to buy the crypto. And yes, there are crypto vending machines that take cash, but most people just send money to Coinbase or one of the platforms. And then if you can get discovery at Coin, if you know the platform and you can find his wallet number, crypto is actually much easier to trace than bank money, because bank money disappears into a bank in the Isle of Man, and then you have to get discovery over there and what happened to that. And but if you can get a crypto wallet number, you can often find the money. The thing is, you have to get the wallet number, and that's sometimes not easy. I did have one case where the man had crypto, and it was his own crypto coin that he had created. So it was pretty
Oh,
easy to
wow.
figure out that it was his, because he had named the crypto coin was the same name as his existing company. And so he said, so say it was alpha.com. Alpha.com was his company. And then he made Alpha Coin, and it was alphacoin.info or something like that. And what he did to link, and we couldn't prove that it was his coin, except that the more information email here on Alpha Coin was to alpha.com, his own company. So that was careless and silly, because he just put his own email that we knew was his email. So he was obviously the administrator of alpha.coin or Alpha Coin, whatever it was. And we could see a couple of $1 million, because it had its own, every cryptocurrency has its own ledger that's publicly available. And I thought, okay, if this is his coin, it's probable that the first $2 million, 2 million coins were his coins, because he created it. And then you could see, and it didn't have very much of a history. And I'm not a specialist in, I wouldn't go and testify and say, this is the path of this, but there are plenty of people that do crypto tracing. So it's there, but really, I think if you look at it, it's much, much harder to find. If you can get money to Bermuda, and I'm not advising anyone to do this, but if you can get money out of the country, you do. There are jurisdictions that make you declare it, but there's some that are more lax, and that's a lot harder to detect. Or no,
How often do you encounter overseas trust?
sometimes I did a big high value divorce a couple of years. It was still going on, but there were several trusts created in Cook Islands in the South Pacific, which is one of the big and more difficult jurisdictions to crack. They were in Nevis in the Caribbean, which is a very lax kind of place to where you can. So they formed trusts in Nevis. The Nevis trusts had bank accounts in the Cook Islands, and the bank account information they were providing looked forged to me. I did an affidavit saying this looks forged, because the numbering, and I'm not a recognized expert on banks, but the dating format on the 3 pages of the statements were all different. So page one was month, day, year. The page two was day, month, year. The third one, the year was a 2 digit instead of a 4 digit year. So I said, this is cut and pasted from somewhere else. This can't be. No bank would do that.
Yeah.
So that was fun, but it's not that often, I have to say that. And this was a long, drawn out thing. See, both of these people were quite wealthy, and so they had the money to spend on a 5-year divorce. And
Well, and also you also have to have enough money to have it be missing and have it not impact your life.
that's right. So this was a case of the other side was asserting that we had done all the things we thought they did. So these were two wealthy people that each had 5 businesses of their own and 5 mutually owned businesses. And we found all kinds of what I thought was fraudulent invoicing in one of the other side's businesses. But in this case, they then asked us for information, and they alleged that our client was doing the same thing. And of course, I couldn't get into that, but it was a big mess, and I think it's still going on. And that was one. But a lot of times, unless it's a very high value thing, they find it's not worth it. As long as you can get enough money from onshore, you get it that way. And I always tell people, look onshore first, because you may find that there's enough there to get to your number, your piece number that you can have, and you'll think, okay, even if I leave a lot of money on the table, I'll be okay.
So, how has social media changed divorce investigations? Are people still accidentally revealing information online that can impact a divorce case? I know as an attorney, my very first piece of advice to any of my clients is get off social media
Yeah.
immediately, but they never listen. So what do
Yeah,
you,
and even the ones that do listen can't order their girlfriends and their kids off social media. So sometimes the executive who runs the regional insurance company in Atlanta, he's off, but his wife's not on, or his wife's still on. His kids who are in college are still on. And what are his kids putting up? The vacation with him and the girlfriend from last year because they're addicted to this, or it's on their Instagram, or it's on the kids' TikTok, or it's on the kids' Instagram, or something like that. It's you got to look at the other members of the family, and even if they do follow your advice and get off, they can't control what everybody else does. And if they're going to see other people, I did it wasn't a divorce, but there was a guy that owed $150,000 and he had a big piece of equipment for an equipment company that had leased him this money, and he just disappeared. And we got him off. The girlfriend was putting up daily. We charted where they drove all the way from New York, all the way down to Florida. And they ended up, and the girlfriend was from Florida. And through electoral records, I found that she had registered to vote at her mother's house in Orlando. And I said to my client, serve him at this house in Orlando. That's where he is, because he had dinner in Miami 2 nights ago. He's coming up from Naples. I'll bet you he's right there. And he was. And he said, "Oh yeah, you can have the equipment." My wife got it in the divorce. I don't even have it anymore. But here's where it is. It's locked up in this warehouse, and we went and repoed it. But that was a case of social media. And in that case, he didn't really care about keeping anything secret. But had he cared, his girlfriend might still have put him on. I don't know, because that's what people like to do.
yeah. Okay, so our last question. After all the investigations you've done, what's one thing that every person going through divorce should do?
Get organized. Don't wait for me to say, here's my questionnaire, write down all this stuff. Start writing down everything you know about this person, every company, every address, every phone number he's ever had, every email address he's ever had. It sounds easy, but it's hard to do. And a lot of women will send me a quite well filled out questionnaire and then come up with addenda. And they'll come up with more. Oh, I forgot this. I forgot that. I forgot. So give yourself a few weeks. And then if it means going into old tax returns. Oh yeah, we had this other company. I can't remember if it's still active or not. I don't think so. We didn't put it on what was it? If you can make copies of tax returns, that you can get your tax return, get the transcript from the IRS. If you don't have the copy, get briefed and ready. And he doesn't have to know you're doing that, and have it all ready, because you may discover a lot of interesting things yourself without even having to hire me. And the best clients are the ones who help, who say, he said we had this company, but he says it's defunct, but I don't believe it. And I'll come back and say, you're right, it's active. So those are so be in, and you can be informed. It's your own household, so there's a lot of information there that I can't get. I had a client once who said, I found this in a drawer. Is this good? Is this useful? And it was a Liberian company, formation for a Lib. And I said, yeah, that's pretty good, because your husband has his own public company. He's the chairman of his own public company. And this Liberian company is a contractor for the public company. And he didn't disclose that's a connected transaction. So the IRS, the SEC would not be happy to hear about it. It's great leverage for you. So that was sitting in a drawer. She said, here, what's this? So anything you can get it, make a copy of it. Not have to be a certified, just get it and make a copy and be ready. You may not need it, but then maybe you will.
Thank you so much. If you're interested in reaching out to Philip, you can find him at the Charles Griffin Intelligence Agency. He's located in New York, but you take cases all over the country, correct?
All over the country and all over the world.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us today and giving us a little bit more information about what a financial investigator can do for you
Well,
and your
thank you.
divorce.
It's a pleasure. I went to your conference earlier this year and I was so impressed with the quality of the people there. It's a real honor to be asked to do this, because your people really know what they're doing. And I work with some of them, and it's a great pleasure to collaborate with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. And if you have any questions for our next episode, you can leave them in the chat box below.